Good morning, San Diego. Welcome into another edition of the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local with you each and every Sunday morning on San Diego's number one sports station, 97.3 The Fan. It's good to be talking with all of you. Talking some Padres baseball. Tough loss last night for the Padres against the Arizona Diamondbacks. Had many of opportunities to win last night's game, and I'm going to take a deeper dive into last night's contest in just a little bit. But, yesterday went up to Rancho Cucamonga, played in a softball tournament. It was fun. I was terrible, but it was fun. I got a little beat up on the warning track as well. Cut open my leg and my arm in a failed diving attempt to make a play on a ball. Locked and loaded, went 1 and 2 up there. It was a good time hanging out with the guys, playing some softball. And then I had tickets to the Padre game with my family, so to quickly hustle down, clean off my wounds in the shower, and then head on down to Petco Park for what was another electric night at Petco. There's been many of those the last couple of years. Of course, it was Star Wars weekend this weekend. That brings a lot of people out, more times than not. But another sellout crowd last night, great atmosphere for Padres baseball. And just overall, a tough ball game for San Diego on multiple levels. And a lot of different things that kind of foreshadow what could be some problems for the Padres in the future. Last night was one of those games. It was like you're going to have one of these games, and you're going to have these games throughout the year where you can't get some hits with runners in scoring position. A couple of balls don't go your way. You have some unfortunate bullpen mishaps as well, and you end up running out of depth, if you will, on the bench when you need it most in the last couple innings. And there's multiple ways to break this game down. And as much as a lot of people leaving the ballpark last night was like, why is Bryce Johnson on the team? It's not really Bryce Johnson's fault. There's a little bit more to it than that, based on the way that the game was managed at the time, earlier in the game. And that's, not a lot of those moves are not necessarily bad moves by Mike Schilt. But last night's game, it was just so frustrating to watch this team continually put runners in scoring position and unable to get them in with 1 out or less than 2 outs. I thought Matt Waldron last night pitched good enough for the team to win. I thought the bullpen was kind of a circus outside of maybe 2 bullpen arms. They have a lot of problems in the bullpen. And you look at the way that game went about, I think it foreshadows what could be disastrous for the Padres in the future, what could be their exit in the postseason, or a reason why they don't advance deep in the postseason, or a reason why, they might not make the playoffs. I do think they're going to make the playoffs, but their big Achilles heel, I think, showed last night. I thought you saw some foreshadowing with that. Lack of having depth, lack of having, a good bat in the outfield, lack of a bullpen, and not really lack of starting pitching help, but I think Matt Waldron's done a great job for you this year. He's not the best of pitchers in Major League Baseball, but he has gone on a streak, and he has done a great job of giving you an opportunity to win every night he pitches. There's nothing more you can ask for as a 5. But with all of these injuries and other issues with the Padres in their starting rotation, you can't be starting a playoff game with Matt Waldron. And that's not his fault. He's been pitching really well. And that's not that game last night. He pitched well enough for the team to win, and he ends up giving up 3 runs, although one of those you could have used some help from Matsui. It was more so the bullpen last night and the lack of depth of the San Diego Padres that lost them the game to the Arizona Diamondbacks. I thought they fought back well, which they have done all season, which has been a major difference between this year's team and last year's team. But there's still potentially a lot of problems that need to be addressed. I don't know if all of them can be addressed at the trade deadline. Let's talk more about last night's game. San Diego Padres got the first run in the bottom half of the first inning. It was good work by the Padres' top half of the order. You got a single out of a rise. Profar kind of struggled at the beginning part of the game before getting a couple of hits late, or at least a clutch hit late. Cronenworth with a single, Machado with a single, knocked in a run, and the Padres were up 1-0. Backside, Arizona was able to get a run back against Matt Waldron. A lot of that with 2 outs, too. They got a leadoff single by Christian Walker and then a punch out and a pop-up and a strikeout. And then all of a sudden it was a walk, a single, pass ball, walk, and Arizona ended up tying the game at 1. And then later on, for the Padres, leadoff single by Peralta, strand him in the 2nd. Not really too much going for him in the 3rd. Padres give up a home run in the 4th on a knuckleball to Lourdes Gurriel Jr. It's going to happen. You're only down 2-1. 4th inning, not too much production out of the offense. Ground out, single out of Jackson Merrill, double play. Top of the 5th inning, Matt Waldron works a 1-2-3. And then bottom 5 again. You get another leadoff hit. You got a leadoff hit double out of Hassan Kim on a ball off the wall. And Kim almost hit a home run in his first at-bat. It was close. He ends up hitting the exact same spot, a little bit higher this time for a double as it overpasses the outfield in left center field. And then you get a strikeout by Higashioka. Then Arise ends up knocking Brandon Pfaadt out of the game with a line drive off his shin. And you got 1st and 3rd with 1 out. Down 2-1. This is where you need to strike in the ball game. So you don't have to rely on your bench later on in the game. And again, this is one of those games that it's going to happen. But Arise with a smoke shot off of Brandon Pfaadt. He leaves due to injury, which means Kevin Ginkel could come in and take as many pitches as necessary to get warmed up. And he comes in and he strikes out Profar and he strikes out Cronenworth. And you had runners on 1st and 3rd with 1 out, unable to capitalize. 6th inning, another 1-2-3 inning for Matt Waldron. Despite having a high pitch count in the first 2 innings, he was able to give you 6 last night before getting taken out in the 7th. 1-2-3 inning for the Padres in the bottom of the 6th. You get to the 7th inning, and then this is where your holes start to emerge. You have a lot of bullpen problems on this Padres team. And we've talked about it before at the trade deadline, and when our trade deadline talks that we continue to put about. You got to be. They need to upgrade the bullpen. The back end's good with Suarez and Estrada. They've been great all year, but and Morejon. I think Morejon's been pretty good too. But they need some depth in that bullpen. And unfortunately for the Padres, the 2 guys, well, really 3. There's 3 of them that have been a disaster. Are the 3 guys that you have under contract, 2 of them until at least 2028, and 1 of them to 2027. And that's Yuki Matsui, who's under contract until 2027, who, by the way, has a player option in 2028. You got this guy for 4 more years after this year. The other one's Wandy Peralta, and we'll get to him in a second. You got him for another 3 years after this year. Now, granted, they're not making they're not making a lot of money, making a decent amount of money for bullpen arms, but you got Wandy Peralta for another 3 years. He can opt out at the end of each year, but the way he's pitching right now, I don't know why he would. Leaving a lot of money on the table. And the last guy for you, and now he's not making a lot. He's in arbitration. And he's been kind of a big surprise to me about how poorly he's pitched this year is Enio de los Santos. He hasn't been very good at all. But you bring in Matsui last night. He doesn't really give you that stroke of confidence on the hill. He inherits a runner on first because Matt Waldron gives up a single to Suarez. He gets Newman to ground into a force out for the first out, and then he gives up a double, a ground out, a triple, and Arizona all of a sudden is up 4-1. But with this Padres team, you can't count them out too many times. They have fought back, they have come back, they have proven that, and they've looked more like the 2020 Padres than the 2023 Padres, I'll tell you that. But the bullpen didn't do you any favors. That is foreshadowing problem number 1. Foreshadowing problem number 2 is your lack of depth. And that takes me to the 7th inning. The Diamondbacks bring in Joe Mantiply, and the Padres did get a run out of this, a couple of runs in this inning. But Mike Shildt decided, this is a total hindsight 2020 move, right? You're down 4-1. It's the bottom of the seventh inning. You want to try to start the inning off right by getting a little bit of a rally to try to cut into that Diamondbacks lead. You want to just chip away at it. So Mike Shildt decides to pinch hit Luis Campusano for David Peralta. I know David Peralta this season has not been hitting that great on the Padres. He's actually worked his average back up to 243. I thought this week he's been a little bit more hot than usual. He's getting more consistent playing time because Fernando Tatis Jr. is out. I know he's up there in age. At the time, I kind of got it. It's like, let's start off with Camp, who has usually a better bat than Peralta. Maybe he can start off with a double or something. But David Peralta he already had a knock in the game. He had a single earlier in the game. He was 1 for 2. And you pinch hit him with the Campusano, which means now, Sullivan can't be used on the bench later because you want to protect the whole backup catcher thing, which is granted. And we'll discuss that in a second. So Campusano comes in a pinch hit. I don't see the situation where you want to do that. I get some parts of it. I get other aspects. I know it's hindsight 2020, but to me, I think you let Peralta hit because you're down 3 runs. It's not like Campusano's coming up as the tying run with a couple of guys on base, and you like his pop over David Peralta's pop. I think using a pinch hitter like Luis Campusano is used in a sense of when guys are on, you need some slug, you want to put the ball in the gap, and you want to be able to score some runs. Where Peralta this year, and I know he had a home run against the Rangers. He's been an all-star in the past. He was a phenomenal player for the Diamondbacks. But at this age for him and at this point in his career, he has been a guy, at least with the Padres, who's going to get on base. And more of a guy that could, kind of work a veteran at bat. So they decided to go with Campusano. Now, when you're making that move, you don't think you're going to be in an extra inning position with Bryce Johnson having to come up in a big spot with the bases loaded. So they go with Campusano. He ends up grounding out. That's fine. It's going to happen. He's coming off the bench. Just had a rehab assignment. Hasn't been back with the club for too long. Ha-Seong Kim gets a single to start the inning. So you got a runner on first with 1 out. You get another single out of Kyle Higashioka. So now you got runners on first and second with 1 out. Luis Arraez lines into a force out. That was an unfortunate play for the Padres. Very unfortunate play for the Padres. He hits a missile right at the first baseman, at Christian Walker. He gloves it. It pops out. Kyle Higashioka was hosed either way. He gets thrown at second. And now you got runners on first and third with 2 outs. Big knock by Profar. Makes it 4-2 as he scores. Kim. Arraez is not fast enough to get around the bases. He stops at third. Cronenworth with a nice single bunt. That was a great bunt by Jake. Loved the spot. Had the shift. Beat the throw to first base. Made it 4-3. Bryce Jarvis comes in. You thought the birthday boy, Manny Machado, was going to get a big swing. Instead, he strikes out. But you know what? You got 2 runs back. You made it a 1-run game. One of your better bullpen pieces comes in Estrada. He replaces Yuki Matsui. Does a great job. Works a 1-2-3. And then in the bottom of the 8th inning, you get a leadoff double out of Donovan Solano. This should be a big inning. Jackson Merrill, then he looked like he was trying to hit a 2-run homer to take the lead. He strikes out swinging. And then you get Bryce Johnson now into play because when you pinch hit for Peralta with Luis Campusano, you need somebody to play the outfield. The only guy left playing the outfield was Bryce Johnson. So now Bryce Johnson's in the lineup. And he flies out to center field. He's able to get a productive out, though, after Jackson Merrill strikes out. And he moves Solano to third with 2 outs. And then Kim gets a double down the left field line, makes it 4-4. Higashioka grounds out. You're all tied up. Adrian Morejon comes in. Again, one of your better bullpen arms, and he gets out of the 9th inning, and you go to the bottom half of the 9th or it's ground out by the top 1, 2, 3 in the order. That's where you got to execute if you're the San Diego Padres, and they failed to do so. You get to the 10th, and I don't know why they didn't leave Morahone in. Obviously, he hasn't been stretched out, but he has been a guy that could go multiple innings, and they go with Wandy Peralta. And that turns into an absolute circus for Wandy Peralta. Gives up a leadoff single on a bunt because he goes over there and kicks the ball around. And now you're in a jam because you had to start with Corbin Carroll on second base, which worked out for the Diamondbacks because he's one of the faster players in Major League Baseball. So now you have runners on first and third. Grichuk walks, the bases are loaded, and that's when the Diamondbacks can open up the floodgates. Walker gets a single, and they bring in Stephen Kolek. Thanks for participating, Wandy Peralta. Gurriel Jr. gets a sac fly, or hits a fly ball to right. Grichuk gets the third. McCarthy grounds out into a force out, but that scores a run. It's 7-4 Arizona, which really takes the wind out of the sails for the Padres. And again, with execution, a couple of innings earlier, after Donovan Solano led off the inning with a double in the 8th, being unable to execute there, you're tied instead of potentially already have had the game won. So then you get to the 10th. And Machado works a walk with Cronenworth at second base. You got first and second and nobody out. Donovan Solano hits a double to right field. He gets it over Corbin Carroll's head. Cronenworth scores and Machado gets the third. You have runners on second and third, down 2 with nobody out. That should be a Padres victory 9 times out of 10, and last night it was the 10th time. Tyler Wade comes in to replace Donovan Solano. I don't mind that move. I mean, at this point in time, you need some wheels. Solano is not fast. Wade is the tying run. That is the most important run at that moment. Jackson Merrill comes up. He walks. That's almost intentional, even though it wasn't, because Jackson Merrill worked a great walk in that at-bat. But now you have the bases loaded with nobody out. The tying run's on second. The go-ahead run's at first. And you have Bryce Johnson stepping into the box. This is not a knock on Bryce Johnson because it's not Bryce Johnson's fault. He has to come up with the bases loaded and nobody out. This is 100% on the roster construction and the lack of depth. Now, the caveat to that is, and the saving grace, is there are some injuries involved here. You know, Bryce Johnson's not currently on the roster if Xander Bogaerts is back. He's not on the roster if Fernando Tatis Jr. is not hurt. I mean, he's not playing if those are 2 of those situations are happening. But you decided to pinch hit for David Peralta earlier in the game with Luis Camposano instead of doing it here. Now, when you did that move, again, as I mentioned before, you didn't know you were going to come up in extra innings, down 2 runs and needing a knock. But that lack of depth is kind of foreshadowing what the Padres could be if they don't make some additions at the deadline. If you decided to have Wade pinch hit for Johnson, then you have Solano on the base pass. So, I mean, you could have done that with no outs. But, if you get down to 1 or 2 outs and you want some speed on the bases, you wouldn't have anything really left. The thing is you probably could have used a starting pitcher. But, Bryce Johnson right there, just it's not him per se. But kind of some of the mismanagement earlier in the game, and again, it's hindsight 2020, and a lot of the lack of depth put the Padres in that position. But there were still no outs. Bryce Johnson strikes out. I mean, even if Bryce Johnson hits into a double play, the Padres score a run, and they have the tying run at third base. And he strikes out swinging. Kim comes up after the Diamondbacks made a pitching change, and he strikes out on a foul tip. Anything besides a double play and a strikeout would have worked. I mean, if an elevated ball scores a run. And then Kyle Higashioka flies out to end the game, and the Padres lose. There was a lot to unpack there with the way that the game was managed. There was a lot to unpack with the way that the roster is constructed. And there was some foreshadowing of what the Padres might run into in tight playoff games with the lack of depth. The bullpen is a major issue for the Padres, and it needs to be addressed at the trade deadline with guys like Wandy Peralta and Yuki Matsui. And unfortunately for the Padres, those are two of the guys that are under contract for a long period of time here. It's cheap, so I guess you could potentially part ways with those players and eat the contracts. But those are two contracts that you need better production out of those players. The bullpen needs a lot of help. The depth needs a lot of help, and hopefully Xander Bogaerts comes sooner rather than later in order to improve that. But that's another area of need. The Padres do need a bat, and we'll talk more about that on the show. But I saw a lot of foreshadowing of what potentially could be a problem for the Padres in the near future. Aside from that, it's going to happen. Padres are going to lose games like that throughout the season. It happens. They blew a lead on Friday. They were able to overcome it. Last night, they came back, and they couldn't get it done in extra innings. We're going to talk more Padres baseball throughout the show. 833-288-0973. 833-288-0973. Big holiday weekend, so I know a lot of you guys are still waking up talking Padres baseball here on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Welcome back to the Braden Surprenant Show. Live and local each and every Sunday morning from 8 to 10. Full show today. We had a shortened show last week with the Padres in Boston, Mass. Hope the Padres try to take 2 out of 3 from the Arizona Diamondbacks today. Because despite last night's loss, everything could be rewritten with a series win today against Arizona. It's the Padres. Tough for the Padres last night in terms of the MLB standings. But again, it doesn't really matter. You're just trying to win series and hope teams that you're in behind are losing series. But Braves ended up winning yesterday. Dodgers won yesterday. So the Padres fall back to 7.5 behind LA. And they are now in a spot where they are a half game in front of St. Louis and 2 games back of Atlanta in the NL wild card. Again, we have had already 90-something games this year played for the San Diego Padres before the ceremonial first half. I'm Braden Surprenant. This is the Braden Surprenant Show each and every Sunday morning. As I mentioned before, give us a follow on social media at @B_SURP. I'm on X, I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok, and I am on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube page at @B_SURP. If you want to weigh into the show, you can give us a call, 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. You can take part in the YouTube chat on 97.3 The Fans YouTube page or my YouTube page at @B_SURP. I can see both of those. We are live on Instagram as well and as also on Facebook. So thanks again for making our morning a part of yours. I want to mention, I went to the game last night, and, there was a lot of things about the game last night that I wanted to talk about in terms of, the fan experience. It was very interesting. From a couple of Dodger fans looking for trouble, as well as, I don't know what it is or what happened, and maybe it's just a full crowd. And I know the section that, I have tickets in is a difficult section because it's very long and a long walk from the top of the concourse all the way down to, where our seats are in terms of traffic. But just the etiquette of, walking in and out of your seats at crucial times was, it's beyond frustrating. And we'll talk about that when we come back. I do want to get to your phone calls, though. Let's go out to a loyal listener out in New Jersey. Mitch in New Jersey weighing in on the Braden Surprenant Show. Mitch, what's going on?
Looks like James Wood. He had a great game yesterday. And the guy looks like the real thing. I'll let you talk, and you have a nice week.
Well, I appreciate that, Mitch, and for some on the YouTube, I fixed that now, so the people that missed out on what Mitch was saying. A couple of things that Mitch said in that thing. He said, well, he was talking about Oakland, and he's like, they're going to Sacramento, so why not? He brought up the fact that it was kind of interesting. I actually don't mind the idea. I mean, it's very interesting, to say the least. But, why doesn't, and there's obviously politics. We like to call that politics. But it's interesting to see that his idea of, the Rays for a time being wanted to, go back and forth with, Montreal and Tampa and be a home team in 2 different cities. That would be kind of ridiculous in terms of, family locations and everything like that. Why don't the A's do that with Oakland and Sacramento since it's closer? It's not a bad idea aside from the fact that, there's obviously an irreparable relationship between the city of Oakland and the Athletics right now. Or bounce around a bunch of Northern California cities. That's not a bad idea. I mean, it's an interesting idea. The A's they're without a home anyway for a long period of time. Why not just be the traveling circus in Northern California? He went on to ask, talk about the Padres in terms of like picking up pieces at the deadline. I mean, I brought up Ursig and Miller for the A's a couple of months ago. I just think it's going to cost a lot of prospect capital potentially because everybody's going to want bullpen arms, but I think you can find other bullpen arms that are better than what you have currently at the trade deadline. It needs to be addressed. We got another person weighing in on Twitter. Again, you can follow me on X at B_SURP, and you can weigh in on Twitter as well. John B. at Punkball76. I think you said it well. Depth will get much better when Xander and Fernando get back, but we need a bullpen arm or two. Once you're in the playoffs, if you make it, the fourth and fifth starters aid the bullpen also. Going to be an interesting month, to say the least. Yeah. That will be the situation for the Padres, obviously, when it comes to the bullpen. I mean, and that's why, like, if you add some starters to the rotation or one, everybody gets bumped back a bit. And so now, and I don't think Matt Waldron's stuff plays in the bullpen, so maybe he starts a game 4 in a playoff series. He can't possibly be worse than some of the guys that have started game 4 for the Padres the last couple of years. But, if you added another starting pitcher wherever they're at, you get to bump somebody back to the bullpen. If you add like a Cal Quantrill to the team, which is near the end of your starting rotation, he would be a bullpen piece, which is better than what you have seen so far. Or if you add, let's just say you go out and get Garrett Crochet, and I know Cease isn't pitching that well, but if you have him and, who knows what you're going to get with Musgrove and Darvish now. There's an updated report on Darvish. There's no guarantee that he's going to come back this year. We'll talk more about that when we come back. But again, as they were saying, or as John B. was saying on Twitter, yes, your fourth and fifth starter usually bounce back into the bullpen. I mean, I theoretically have Michael King back in the bullpen, which is what he did in New York. So it's a very interesting topic of discussion. It would have been interesting to see this team last year that had great pitching go through the postseason if they made it, with guys like Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha and the rotation that they had, where those guys would have been bullpen pieces. Having Seth Lugo, who just went through an entire season as a starting pitcher, who was always a bullpen piece, to come out of the Padres bullpen would have been great to see last year, but that wasn't the case. We're going to get back to more of your phone calls and more of your conversation in just a little bit. We do have an update on you, Darvish, from Kevin Acee when we come back. I'm Braden Surprenant. This is the Braden Surprenant Show, San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. 8:41 on a Sunday morning. Thanks again for making our day a part of yours. If you're on YouTube, be sure to give us a like. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube page at B_SURP. Follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at B_SURP. At BSURP. Braden Surprenant Show, as I mentioned, live and local programming on the weekends. Always great to talk some Padres baseball for you early in the morning. A lot of you guys were up late last night because it's a late arrival for a lot of you in the YouTube chat. But we're glad that you're a part of our day. We got an update on Darvish's situation. And, there's a lot of working parts with this where, Darvish is a very private guy. He lives a very private life. He doesn't like people knowing about what's going on in his life. He keeps his family life separate. He's a very respectful man, and he is a very honorable man as well. And so when this news came down and Mike Schultz said it's a private matter with his family, you accept that and be like, he's just not going to be with the team when the Padres put him on the restricted list. So a lot of us in the media don't know exactly what's going on, and the Darvish camp is never going to try to leak. They're never going to leak what's going on. And there have been some rumors out there that we're not going to address. Obviously, it is a private family matter, but the latest that we have from Kevin Acee was in his pregame story today. Darvish was placed on the restricted list yesterday, and it is not known whether he will return this season, which would be a devastating blow for the Padres from an on-field perspective, but obviously more focused on Darvish, and hopefully everything is okay with his family. Kevin Acee goes on to say you can read the news and what Schultz said before the game, the only public comments about the situation in Jeff Sanders' pregame story online. In short, Darvish is not being paid while he attends a personal matter. Details are minimal, but sources said that there is a legitimate chance Darvish returns this season. There is also a very real chance he does not. Those sources said there is not a legal issue, and is often the case when a player is placed on the restricted list. The sources said there is not a legal issue, as is often the case when a player is placed on the restricted list, which is what I thought initially. But it's not a legal problem. This is a matter involving Darvish's family, and it will be up to Darvish when he returns. What should be considered is that Darvish is an honorable man, and while a team has to request that a player be placed on the restricted list, it would make sense that Darvish did not fight to be paid while he steps away from the team to focus on what he feels what he needs to focus on. So it's not a legal matter with Darvish, as it's always usually the case. When you see the restricted list, it's always something like, you think of the worst. You think of some type of domestic problem. You think of all this other stuff. But since it's not a legal issue, and the fact that you is one of those players, and I totally believe this by the way that, the person that Darvish is, that he's going to be away from the team for a long time, and he wants to be able to return when he wants to return, and he doesn't need a paycheck during that time, and he's going to focus on what he needs to focus on, and the Padres are going to focus on what they need to focus on. So I'm sure we'll get more on this. It'll be a little bit more. I don't think you'll ever know the true story. And it's a very interesting situation, but at the same time, you have to respect that Darvish needs to take care of some things, and he's not going to be with the team, which really puts the Padres in a problem right now. Again, more with starting pitching because you don't know what you're going to do with Joe Musgrove. But hopefully everything works out for you and his family, and I don't think you're going to get too much more information on that. Kevin Acee reporting that it's not a legal issue, which is good news, I think, for anybody that potentially feared the worst with Darvish. And now hopefully him and his family get the support that they need, and it works out. But that was the latest that we got from you, Darvish. So it doesn't sound like he's going to be with the team for the time being. There is a chance that he does come back, and there's also a chance that he does not. So it's going to be one of those Mike McCoy situations. You'll see him when he runs out there in a Padres uniform. So hopefully it's not that much of a serious matter. But obviously with him stepping away, it's a little bit of an issue for you, Darvish. Let's check back over to Padres baseball, though. I wanted to get that update out there. Obviously last night, and I saw Prolifically Great on YouTube with his comment, Bryce Johnson ain't it. He's not. I mean, I feel bad for the guy. He's trying the best he can, but you can't have a guy like Bryce Johnson come up in extra innings with the bases loaded and nobody out and not have depth ready to go off the bench. That's a big reason why for a long time on shows that I've been a part of that you got to have that veteran on the bench. And they do have some veterans, and it's gonna change a little bit when Fernando and Xander come back. But I just, for me, with the Bryce Johnson move, I mean, I understand he's kind of filling a void right now with Fernando not being there. But is he better in that spot than a guy like Jose Azocar? Or is it kind of the same? I mean, it might be kind of the same, right? I mean, you had a Jose Azocar up here for half the season. And then you send him down and get some at-bats, which is fine. But I don't know how much longer you can roll with Bryce Johnson right now in the lineup. But again, it's not his fault. I mean, he's doing the best he can. But the way that the game was managed before that, it's tough to see and play out with not having a guy on the bench ready to go. And the other thing to me, it's I understand the whole you got to keep a catcher ready to go just in case. But at that point in the game, when you're in extra innings, I mean, how many innings do you think you're going to go where you're hoping that Higashioka doesn't get hurt? Right? I mean, because you still had Brett Sullivan you could have thrown to. And now, is Brett Sullivan going to make a bigger difference than Bryce Johnson? I don't know, but I think you have a better chance with Brett Sullivan. But a lot of I'm a little bit more riskier on that. And baseball teams don't like having their emergency catcher or their backup catcher be used in situations like that where you now don't have an emergency plan if your starting catcher gets hurt at some point in time. But, I mean, I guess you could have had him pinch hit or whatever and then go into the game. And then Sullivan could have been your catcher. And then Higgy could have been out. And then you could have rotated, shifted the defense a little bit. And, the unfortunate thing is they don't have Joe Musgrove available because that guy could do a lot of things in the field too and pinch run. The other situation that the Padres, one Padres fan in the chat said, what about Tyler Wade pinch hitting instead? And I said, well, you'd have to have somebody else pinch run for Solano like Sullivan, or nobody pinch run for Solano, who is an important run, but I guess you could have used a pitcher. There's got to be some pitchers on the staff that have some decent speed, at least speed better than Donovan Solano. And, you just hope that you're not getting them hurt on the base paths. But I think in extra innings like that, I mean, you're now in a day and age of baseball where extra innings aren't going to go very long with all the rules and the pitch clock. It's not like you're going to play a 22-inning game again. I mean, you get to extra innings, you're barely going to go over 12 innings more times than not. You might as well unload the bench if you want to go get that dub. But I thought last night was a real lack of depth showing for the Padres, more so than anything else. It was one of those losses that it was going to be a lot. I mean, you're going to lose games like that all the time, but it foreshadowed a lot of issues that the Padres still have, despite them playing really well. And, I went on the show on Friday and this week about how much better they're playing and how they're surviving right now without, $73 million of their payroll on the roster and on the injured list. And it's great for the time being, but it's not a sustainable situation. And when that ride starts to run out, you're going to need some help elsewhere. Otherwise, your holes are going to be glaring yet again. And you can't overlook that because you seem to be playing a lot better baseball. Because they've played a lot better baseball. I mean, Manny's been hot. You know, he struck out last night in that one spot, but he's been hot. Ended up working a walk in that last inning. You've had great performances this year out of Jerickson Profar and Jackson Merrill, and I talked about a lot of this last Sunday. So you have a lot of great things working out for you right now, but the holes at the beginning of the season that we talked about are still the same holes that you have right now. And they're going to continue to be the same holes in this team until you address those at the trade deadline. And as I mentioned earlier this week, you're not going to be able to address everything at the trade deadline with the prospects that you have. I mean, the trade deadline is the cram for the test. You had the offseason to build the team. You had the offseason to fill out a lot of the problems. And now this is like the last-minute ditch effort before you gear it up for the postseason. Bullpen was a problem last night. Depth was a problem last night. Another bat in the outfield was a problem last night. The problems that you have had the entire... And then on top of that, again, losing Yu Darvish for an unknown amount of time, mixed with not knowing when Joe Musgrove's going to come back. They're going to need to make some moves here at the deadline. And I think what we have seen the last couple of weeks from the Padres and the way they've played has shown that they are good enough with their supporting cast to add to this team to fill out some of the spots and to be able to buy at the deadline. And I think they had to buy at the deadline anyway with the way everything was set up for them in terms of the window of opportunity for the Padres. I mean, they're going to get some added depth back when Xander comes back, and he's continuing to play in El Paso. He walked a couple of times last night and struck out. He got that one hit at the beginning of his rehab assignment on July 4th, and hopefully he gets to a point where he feels good, can take some swings, and he gets put back in the lineup. But at some point in time, with Xander back, even if you had Xander back last night, and we talked about what the starting lineup would look like, instead of Bryce Johnson in that big spot, you have some type of combination of like Xander Bogaerts, Hassan Kim, or Donovan Solano, whoever didn't start that night. I'd take all three of those guys in a pinch hit situation with the bases loaded and nobody out than Bryce Johnson. And again, it's not a Bryce Johnson problem. It's a lack of depth problem for the Padres and what did him in last night. So I know a lot of people taking cheap shots. Bryce Johnson sucks. You got to send him on. You know, he's up here to fill a roster spot to help the Padres while they're a little banged up still. So help is coming on the horizon, but can they add additional help at the trade deadline? It's a seller's market, which means there's going to be a lot of buyers out there looking for pieces. But the more this kind of plays out, the more you look at the standings, the more it's starting to separate itself in the National League wild card. I mean, the Cubs are starting to fall behind now. They're 6 games out of the race. The Washington Nationals 4.5 back. The Reds are 4.5 back. The Pirates are 4 back. You start looking at it, there's a lot of teams that are slowly starting to come from tweener teams, the sellers, and some buyers to some tweener teams, both in the American League and the National League side. 1 hour in the books. Another hour to come. Coming up next, if you want to join the show, 833-288-0973. 833-288-0973. We're going to talk more Padres baseball when we come back on the Braden Surprenant Show, 97.3 The Fan. Hour number 2 of the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each and every Sunday morning. Thanks for making our morning a part of yours. If you haven't done so already on YouTube, give us a like and drop a subscribe to my YouTube page at B_SURP. I'm going to drive the subscribers on my YouTube page. You can also follow me on social media at B_SURP, at BSURP, on X, on Instagram, on TikTok. Talking a lot about the Padres and how, like last night, how a lot of things showed last night in the loss that could be the downfall of the Padres in the future. From many different angles. I mean, obviously, the news of Darvish is not great. We had more details on that. It's a family matter for Darvish, and not necessarily a legal matter. And he is now on the restricted list. Players on the restricted list, according to an article from AJ Cassaville, as he went and looked up the rules. Players on the restricted list remain under contractual control of the big league club they play for, but they are no longer with the club, and they are no longer mandated to receive compensation. The reasons players can be placed on the restricted list are numerous and subject to MLB's approval. I don't see anything on, by the way, in terms of like the competitive balance. I would assume you probably still have to, he still counts towards the cap or whatever, because some people were asking about that. And I can't remember when Trevor Bauer was on the restricted list for the Dodgers if he still counted towards their payroll or their competitive balance tax. I can't remember off the top of my head, and I keep looking it up, and hopefully we can get an answer on that sooner rather than later. But hopefully everything is fine with the Darvish family. A couple of things last night, and again, it's kind of been the theme of the show today, that kind of foreshadowed the problems of the San Diego Padres that could be their downfall in the future. One that I haven't addressed yet was slug and the slugging percentage for the Padres. And they hit some doubles last night. But a couple of times last night and where I was sitting, and I'm going to get to like ballpark etiquette in a second, because it was ridiculous last night, the ballpark etiquette. I get it. Packed house, big crowds. Not everybody there's a diehard baseball fan. Know the unwritten rules about the ballpark. But as I was sitting there in our season tickets and in the air with all the same people that we usually see, talking, I kept looking up the scoreboard and just seeing how many hits the Padres had in comparison to the Arizona Diamondbacks. I mean, the Padres out-hit the Diamondbacks 14-9 last night. And lost the game 7-5. But out of those, they actually got a decent amount of extra base hits, surprisingly enough, on that 14 that they put on the board. But out of those 14 hits, Kim had 2 doubles, Solano had 2 doubles, and Profar had a double. So that's 5 extra base hits, which is pretty good. Everything else was a single. So they had 5 doubles and 9 singles last night for the Padres. Diamondbacks had 9 hits, 1 double, a triple, and a home run. So they had 6 singles last night. I mean, 9 singles for the Padres last night. And went 6 for 19 with runners in scoring position. That leads to another problem for the Padres. I mean, they hit the ball really well. I mean, if you look at their numbers, I mean, across the board in Major League Baseball, they do get a lot of hits. But they don't have a lot of slug. The Padres do not have a lot of slug on their team. They get a lot of hits. They hit for average, but they don't have a lot of slug. If you look at the Padres totals on the year for team, their batting average is the second best in Major League Baseball by 1/100th of a point. or 1/1000th of a point, whatever. They are second in batting average with a 264 team batting average, right behind the Houston Astros that have a 265 team batting average. Their slugging percentage is in the top 10, but it's still way further down than it needs to be. They don't have a lot of slug on the team. It's starting to heat up a little bit more in June and then throughout July, but they've lacked the slug. They get a lot of base hits and a lot of singles, but they're not getting those extra numbers. They're not getting those extra base hits. They do walk a decent amount. They had 14 strikeouts last night. But they, even in the strikeout department, they're second to last in the strikeout department with 629 strikeouts. It's a good offensive team with the hits, but they got to be able to get some extra base hits. Why am I bringing that up? Well, on the Instagram feed, again, you can follow me on Instagram at @B_SURP. You can find we had a gentleman in the chat on Instagram go, well, why not trade for Kevin Pillar? Well, Kevin Pillar is just like every other player you have on this team. He's a guy that doesn't have a lot of slug. I mean, he's a good player. He's having a good year. As Craig Elston said on the show multiple times, you could flip a minor league pitcher for this guy before teams want him. He's a low slugging percentage guy, usually. This year, he's having a nice little year. But another base hit type player. He's hitting 276 this year. You need some pop in this lineup. And you're not getting too much pop out of this lineup right now. Starting to get a little bit more. Then at the beginning of the year, as Manny's hitting the ball well and Jackson's hitting the ball well, but 14 hits last night, 9 of them singles. Got to start getting some extra base hits if you are the San Diego Padres. I mentioned I went to the game last night. And I'm curious to get the fans' perspective on this. I just think, and this might sound like an old man yelling at the clouds. Another great atmosphere last night for the Padre game. Another sellout. It is the place to be. You get so many fans now at Padre games from all walks of life. Baseball fans, Padres fans, Diamondback fans. And, maybe some of this comes with the territory of being a packed house. But I'll tell you what, I mean, I went to a couple of games this year in other ballparks that were also packed and didn't necessarily have this problem. I mean, the lack of awareness going to your seat at Petco Park is just, it's unbelievable. Maybe it's just a Section 118, 116 thing. But I'm sitting in the seats last night, and here's the deal. The seats are they're in Section 118, and they're over to the side of, where the aisle, we're on the closer side where the aisle's to our right, which is, in the way of, the game. So you have to, look through an aisle to the field of play, or to the infield rather. I have probably seen in those seats, I have probably seen an entire at bat without somebody in front of me one time. One time. And it's all the same stuff. It's hilarious. Now, I will give the benefit of the doubt of the sense that it's in the lower field section, and 118 stretches all the way up to the concourse, and in the lower section of Petco Park, where the Jerome seats are, they have that little walkway around. It doesn't go all the way out to 118. So if you're down in the lower level of 118, you got to get through the higher level and the lower level, and by the time the usher lets you through, by the time you get down to the lower level, I mean, the next at bat's already started. And so now you got all these people going in and out of your seats. But it's up and down, up and down. But the best part, I mean, it's not the best. It sucks. But the funniest thing about these seats, for some reason, the people in those seats in the area, and maybe it's all over the ballpark. It could be all over the ballpark. I can't tell you how many times somebody goes down the stairs and then they stop and they look up and they're all confused and they just stand there. And they stand there in the aisle and they're just looking around aimlessly of like, am I in the right section? I don't know if I'm in the right section. And to be honest with you, I've seen this person at least 4 times already. They are in the right section. I even know where their seat is. I've seen them sit in that seat 4 times during the game. I understand. People got to get up, got to go to the bathroom, get a drink, get some food, whatever. I get it. But even if there's somebody holding the sign like "Do not go" at the top, the amount of time it takes to get the people down the stairwell, and into their seats takes almost a batter anyway. Almost to the point where you shouldn't even allow people to walk down the seats until the end of the inning starts. Or at the end of the inning, before the next inning starts, in the in-between innings. But they hold the crowd during the at-bat. But the problem is, again, when they get through after the end of the at-bat and the change of the action, they don't get to their seats in time before the next at-bat happens. But maybe I'm just a stadium-savvy guy. I have never once gotten to a seat at a stadium, and even if it's a stadium I've never been to, but once I get to my seat for the first time, I know where I'm sitting. I know where it's at. I don't sit there and look aimlessly like, am I in the right section? Is this 116 or 118? Is this still 118? You mean they haven't switched this to 116 yet? This is still section 118. We sure about that? All right. But while they're doing it, instead of like kneeling down, like the food delivery people like do in the other sections, they just like stand there and they're eating their popcorn and they're like, "Where's our seats, Bill? I don't remember where we sit." It's not like you have it on your phone. Like you check, you see at the top, see at the bottom. Last night in the 9th inning, last night in extra innings. I mean, now at this point in time, this happened a couple of times last night in extras. Before our buddy Bryce Johnson came to the dish, there's bases loaded. There are no outs. The Padres are down 2. I got 50 people going up and down the aisle aimlessly. The same people. Going up, going down. What are you getting? You can't get concessions anymore. They're closed. There's no way you're going to the bathroom. That makes sense. Where are you going? At this point in time, there's no reason to be standing up and moving up and down the aisle when you got nobody out in the bottom of the 10th inning and the bases are loaded. What are you standing there for? I couldn't believe it. I was like, I did not even see anything. It was just like, oh, man, what happened on that pitch? I couldn't tell. There's somebody in my way moving up and down the aisle. For what? The previous thing I was bitching about, which I think a lot of people have complained about, a lot of that is out of your control. The usher's still up at the top. Takes a long time to get down into 118. I understand that during the middle of the game, there's breaks in the action. People want to go get food. We offer so much great food at Petco Park. We got great beverages at Petco Park. People got to go to the bathroom. They've been drinking all day. I understand all of that. It's more of the standing in the way and the cluelessness that's the most difficult to deal with. But when it's like the 9th and 10th inning and everybody's on the edge of their seat, what are you standing aimlessly for in the aisle looking for your seat? It's the 9th inning. You didn't just get there. You've been there the entire time. Amazing. Couldn't believe it. All right, Chris, what are you done with my talk? Chris is fed up. You know why, Chris? Are you the guy that stands in the row? Unreal. But it was crazy. It happens all the time. But it used to never happen. I don't know if it's it might be a big crowd thing. I also think where the seats are that I have is a major problem. I don't think it's going to win. If you sit to the left of the aisle and the aisle is in your way, you're kind of asking for it. That's why I try to find other spots for that. The other thing that I thought was very interesting, don't be this guy. There's about 2 sections over. It was ridiculous. There's 2 sections over. Let me know if you've ever done this. Let me know if you've ever done this at a ballpark. Let's say you're a Padres fan. Like, if you're a Padres fan at a Dodgers game in LA and the Padres are not playing, it's like the Diamondbacks or the Rockies, and you wear Padres gear and the Rockies hit a home run against the Dodgers, do you stand up and like start flaunting your Padres stuff like you're cheering for the other team because you hate the Dodgers so much? I saw 2 guys yesterday, all decked out in LA Dodger gear, stand up and like just be the biggest Diamondbacks fans of all time yesterday, talking crap and like going, yeah, let's go Dodgers every time like the Diamondbacks scored a run. Who does that? You're just asking for trouble. Hilarious. The fan etiquette at the ballparks was great. Yes, Ashland. The 118 was having a good time. Must have been. Couldn't see the game. I mean, it's tough. Couldn't see it. I'm Braden Surprenant. It's the Braden Surprenant Show. We're going back with Padres talk when we come back. 833-288-0973. 833-288-0973. You want to weigh in on the chat? Weigh in on the chat. We got 2 more segments left to go. Padres trying to win the series against the Diamondbacks later this afternoon. We're going to talk more about that when we come back on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Welcome back to the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each and every Sunday morning. Padres and Diamondbacks will get underway today at 1:10, if I'm not mistaken. 1:10 Pacific time, 12:10 pregame show. Equal Water SoCal Padres pregame show right here on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97 through the Fan. Game is only on Roku TV today, so if you want local radio, you'll be able to listen to the game. You can listen right here on 97 through the Fan. Don Arcillo is actually calling the game on TV for Roku, paired with Tom Candiotti from the Arizona Diamondbacks broadcast. So that will be interesting to see. For all of you that have Roku, I think is how you watch the game. I don't necessarily know how to watch the game today. If you have a Roku TV, maybe. I think the Padres maybe put something out earlier today, but I think that's how you do it. It's on Roku Sunday leadoff. New for 2024, you can catch your favorite MLB action live every Sunday morning with MLB Sunday leadoff on Roku, streaming free on the Roku channel. No subscription needed, so maybe you can't watch the game. Sunday leadoff games will be streamed without any local home television territory blackouts. Start your Sunday mornings with MLB Sunday leadoff on Roku. So if you have Roku TV, Amazon Fire Stick, Google TV, Samsung TV, any type of Roku players, watch it on the web, watch it on the mobile app, and then you can listen right here on 97.3 The Fan. Here, so you can watch it. It's free, which is kind of cool. I'll have to find a way to do that on my TV today. Hosting a graduation party for my brother and his friends. Should be a good time. A little barbecue later on this afternoon. All-Star teams get announced today. Oh, if you have the Padres.tv, you can also watch it. Don't need the Roku. All-Star teams announced today on ESPN. I think that is a afternoon situation, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. The All-Star teams will be announced at 2:30 p.m. Pacific time on ESPN. So, while you're watching the Padres, you can flip over at 2:30 to ESPN and see what the teams will be, and we'll see how many Padres end up making the team. Earlier in the year, ESPN released their preview of who they thought could potentially make the All-Star team outside of the reserves or outside of the starters. And how many All-Stars do you think the Padres will get? We already got two with Fernando and Profar as starters. Now, we know that Fernando's not going to play in the game, obviously, ailing with that stress reaction in his femur, and he is out for a significant amount of time. But he still gets to notch that in his resume, if you will. According to David Schoenfield of ESPN, and this was written about a month ago, but he's got his choices for his all-star team, which include one Padre as a reserve and one Padre pitcher as a reserve. He's got Will Smith, Freddie Freeman from the Dodgers, Christian Walker of the Diamondbacks, Bryce Terang of the Brewers, Ryan McMahon of the Rockies, Ellie De La Cruz of the Reds, Jazz Chisholm Jr. of the Marlins, Brandon Nimmo of the Mets, Christian Yelich from the Brewers. He already made it as an all-star starter. He had Teoscar Hernandez as a starter, so probably you could switch those two. He's got a DH and Marcell Ozuna coming off the bench, and he has Luis Arraez as a potential reserve for the NL All-Star team, which would be great to see Luis Arraez coming off the bench. This is, again, before that they start replacing guys that are injured, too. So there might be a chance maybe for Jackson Merrill. I'd be curious to see how this plays out with the voting from the players and the coaching staff to see if Jackson Merrill can make an all-star game. I think he deserves being an all-star. I think he's a fringe all-star player this year with the way that he has performed in his rookie season. He has been the best rookie position player in the National League. It'd be cool to see him in the all-star game. I think a lot of people just assume that when Fernando gets replaced on the all-star team that, oh, well, what about Jackson Merrill? Well, he was way down the list on the fan vote, and Teoscar Hernandez is right there and has had a pretty good year so far. But if you start looking at the stats, Jackson Merrill's outplayed the three other outfielders in most statistical categories. At least the hand-picked ones that we saw on TV, Teoscar Hernandez and Brandon Nimmo and Jazz Chisholm. So I do think Jackson Merrill does have a chance as an injury replacement, but I don't necessarily know if he's making the team as a reserve. But the reserves get announced today. From a pitching standpoint, they did have Robert Suarez on there as making the team. I mean, Robert Suarez, I know what happened on Friday was unfortunate. He didn't get any help from Enyel De Los Santos. But, not on his best, Robert Suarez on Friday. That was his third day in a row pitching, maybe even fourth day in a row pitching. He was used a lot during the road trip. He is the lone Padres pitcher in the bullpen, but he's been the best closer in the National League. Projected All-Stars for the pitching staff that, again, announced today. Zach Wheeler, Shota Imanaga, Tyler Glasnow, Aaron Nola, Logan Webb, Mitch Keller, Chris Sale, Robert Suarez, Ryan Helsley, Matt Strom, and Kyle Finnegan. I'd be really interested to see if Paul Skeens makes the team. And if Paul Skeens ends up being a starter. Because to me, at this point with the All-Star game, let me know. You could put it in the chat and give me a call if you want. The All-Star game to me used to be really fun, and I was into it because they were playing for something. And I do think there's something I think there's something to be said about the amount of I do think there's something to be said about having your World Series home site determined by the league winning the All-Star game is stupid. But at the same time, it gave all these guys an incentive to win, an incentive to play, and now it's mostly about entertainment. But to me, if it's about entertainment, then why not pick the most entertaining guys on this roster? Paul Skeens to face the top half of the American League lineup would be insane to watch. Even though he came up midway through the first half, and regardless if he has all-star numbers or not, the guy's electric on the mound, and to watch him go one inning in the All-Star game against some of the league's best is must-watch TV. But ever since they got rid of that rule, I like watching the introductions, but I used to like watching the introductions when everybody was wearing their own uniform. Now they got to wear the American League and National League uniform in the game. It looks so dumb. It just added to the list of things that Rob Manfred has ruined for Major League Baseball. I loved watching them play in their uniforms. Home teams, they're all wearing their whites. You get to see all the different uniforms all in one place. Road team gets to wear all their grays. It's cool. That's what made it fun. That's what makes it fun. That's what you get to watch. You get to see everybody in action at the same time. All play. You don't need to see them in a uniform game. In a uniform, the same uniform. Who cares? It's boring. Have some pizzazz, some individuality. It's great. All-Star game rosters announced today at 2:30. We'll see how many. I actually brought that up. It's funny. They said, somebody in the chat on YouTube says, All-Star games should at least wear their City Connects. Might as well put all this money in these City Connects. Now, all the All-Star games now have been it's come to the point where why do you even play them? And I think that's a big reason why Bryce Harper continues to petition Major League Baseball to allow Major League Baseball players to take a break during the season every 4 years to compete in the Olympics. That's a different topic. That is a different topic. Let me ask you, baseball fans, do you want the Padres season to go on a 3-week hiatus in the middle of August for the Olympics? Hockey does that. They do that in January every 4 years for the Winter Olympics. Instead of doing an all-star game, they do an all-star break for 3 weeks, and all of the international players or all the players in the NHL go play for their home countries in the Olympics. And it's fun and it's must-watch TV. I think it'd be fun and must-watch, but are you willing to give up 3 weeks of August Padres baseball in order to watch that? I don't know about that. I don't know if I want to do that. Could you imagine? You lose Manny and Fernando and Xander and all these players. They're all playing for their home countries in the middle of a pennant race, and then God forbid one of them gets hurt during this 3-week period, and then they got to come back and rehab and get react. I mean, I don't know how you could do it in baseball when you play so many games and the season's already long. You can't take 3 weeks off in the middle of August, especially for a sport that, even though they play their playoff games in the fall, it's a sport that's very dependent on weather. You can't push the season back another 3 weeks every 4 years. Or maybe those 4 years you start the season in March and you start spring training end of January and February. I guess you could do that. And you take August off. But I think it'd be fun to watch, to see these guys play internationally, but I don't know if I'm willing to give up 3 weeks in the middle of the season. I mean, you'd be seeing everybody at their best, unlike the World Baseball Classic where nobody's built up yet because they took the winter off. So from that perspective, you'll be able to see it, but a 3-week break for everybody to play in the Olympics, I don't know if I mean, it'd be cool, but at the same time, as a Padres fan, being selfish, it would be kind of lame. It would suck. Padres, Diamondbacks, final game of the 3-game series. We'll talk more about that when we come back. 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. This is the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local, each and every Sunday morning on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3, The Fan. Final segment of the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local sports programming each and every Sunday morning on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Thanks for making our morning a part of yours. If you haven't done it already, give me a follow on social media, B_SURP. Subscribe to my YouTube page at BSurp on YouTube. I'm also on Instagram, X, and TikTok, if you will. If you haven't done so already, the 45 of you watching on YouTube, give us a like on the YouTube video. It is greatly appreciated. I want to give a shout out to Kathy in LA, one of our loyal listeners to 97.3 The Fan, for sending me this. It's an interesting idea for the All-Star game and I'm going to take it a step further, but everybody's favorite Padre out here, Eric Hosmer, on his weekly podcast, talking about what the All-Star game should do, kind of implementing some of the Savannah Banana rules in the All-Star game.
There's a rule in banana ball that if the fans catch a foul ball, I don't know if this is during one of the innings or during the whole game. If the fan catches the ball, the batter is out. What if we were to bring that to the Major League All-Star game? During the All-Star game, if fans catch a ball, the hitter's out right on the spot. Would that not be the most electrifying All-Star game in all of sports? Mix that in with the home run derby.
100%. That's when you try these things. I think the talk of trying to make our game more entertaining during the actual season, I don't think we should make too many changes to the actual, obviously. But when we're talking about the fun element, when you see those bananas selling out big league stadiums everywhere they go, it's because they show up, they're entertained, and they leave with smiles on their faces. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be entertaining people. To have a rule like that would be a game changer.
It'd be very interesting to see, nonetheless. I think if you implemented some of the banana ball rules and made it fun, I mean, again, it's the All-Star game is about entertainment. It's not it's not really about the game anymore. I mean, guys are out there competing, whatever, but it'd be kind of fun to make it like that. I don't think you need to make it like a circus spectacle. But it would be really interesting to see and implement some of the rules, like a fan catching the ball in the stands. That'd be fun, I guess. I mean, here's the deal: it's like the All-Star game is already meaningless. It's just a glorified scrimmage. But it would be interesting to see the way some of these rules are played about. They have 9 rules in banana ball. They have rule number 1, which is every inning counts. When, if you win the inning, you get a point. So they have a point system. So winning innings gets you points. I mean, I think you could implement that. They have a 2-hour time limit. I don't necessarily know you need to do that in the All-Star game. That's their second rule. They got these one-on-one showdown tiebreakers where you get a pitcher versus a hitter with only one fielder. I mean, that's a rule that you don't necessarily need, but it'd be kind of interesting to see. No bunting. Nobody bunts in the All-Star game anyway. That's not really a rule. They go back to batters can steal first base at any point in time. I mean, some of these are really fun. No walks allowed, I think, would be pretty good for the All-Star game, where you could get a guy you could find something else to happen instead of a walk where the guy can run around the bases or something like that. I mean, I think you have to find different ways to make the game fun and come up with your own rules that are fun that aren't necessarily a circus, because you don't want to make it completely like banana ball. The fan in the stand catching the ball, maybe. I mean, I don't really think it would be kind of cool if you had an all-star team, what if you made the all-star game where it's the American League versus the National League, but every division's got their own team and they play a different team each inning. So the first inning is the National League West versus the American League West, and then the next inning it's the 2 Central teams play each other, and then the third inning the 2 East teams play each other. And then in the 4th inning, it's the National League West versus the American League Central. I mean, and go through, and then you could chalk up points. You play an inning game or whatever. I just think they got to find different ways to try to make it entertaining now, because the game itself for a lot of these All-Star games are no longer entertaining. Are they going to have the pitcher on stilts? Yeah, let's put Paul Skeens on stilts while he pitches. Some different things you could do. Padres Diamondbacks today from Petco Park. Again, if you want to watch the game, it's on Roku today. It's free to watch. You can watch it. You could also always listen live right here on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Sam Levitt will get you started on the EcoWater SoCal Padres pregame show coming up at 12:10 p.m. Pacific time, with the game starting at 1:10. It'll be Dylan Cease for the Padres going against Ryan Nelson of the Arizona Diamondbacks. Dylan Cease really needs a bounce back. He has been awful since May 14th. We did a deep dive on him earlier in the week about just how poor he has been as a starting pitcher for the Padres since May 14th. He was really getting a lot of play at his fastball and his slider combo. He doesn't really have a third pitch. He likes to use that knuckle curve sometimes, but hasn't really been that effective with it. And when you look at his fastball, I mean, teams have been tagging his fastball in his last couple of starts. That's why Dylan Cease is up to a 7-7 record with a 4.24 ERA. With the state of the San Diego Padres rotation, Dylan Cease really needs to get back into gear and being that ace-type starter that you acquired at the beginning part of the season. Because right now, you don't have Darvish for a significant amount of time. He is on the restricted list. And on the restricted list, he is not going to get paid. He is going to be off the team for a while now. He's still a Padres product, but he is not with the team. He doesn't travel with the team. He doesn't get paid by the team. And he's obviously dealing with a personal matter. Joe Musgrove. No real timetable for his return until maybe August if they're lucky. Those are two of your top-end guys in the rotation. Michael King's been good. Matt Waldron's been serviceable. You're starting to fill out the rest of this rotation. You need Dylan Cease to turn it back on. Because in the report from Kevin Acee earlier today, I mean, there's a chance that Darvish never comes back this season. There's also a chance, obviously, that he does come back. I don't know what that tells you, per se. But if you are not getting Joe back and you're not getting you back, that's a major hole in your starting rotation. And starting rotations are not things that you can completely rebuild at a trade deadline during a seller's market. I went through some of these players earlier this week, or should I say yesterday, on either the trade market or players that are on the trade block that the Padres can go after. I mean, we've talked about what they need the entire first hour of the show, and I thought that was necessary. I thought a lot of it came out yesterday with the way the Padres ended up losing. The three things that A.J. Cassaville put in his article on Padres.com that are deadline moves the Padres could consider. Number one was a high-leverage reliever. Bullpen failed you last night. Number two is a back-end starter. That wasn't really effective last night's game because I thought Matt Waldron pitched good enough to win. But the news of Darvish really escalates that with a back-end starter. And number three is an outfielder/bench bat. You needed an outfielder/bench bat to come up in the 10th inning with the bases loaded and nobody out and get a knock. It's not Bryce Johnson's fault. But you need somebody in that spot. Those are major holes and Achilles heels for the San Diego Padres right now, going into the second half of the season, going into pennant race time, and going into the playoffs. Who are these potential players? I mean, Garrett Crochet always comes to mind. The guy just won Pitcher of the Month for the American League. His F4 is now at a 3.7. He's not getting paid a lot of money, but guess what? It's a seller's market. I mean, you got to part ways with a lot of prospects in order just to acquire Garrett Crochet, who might be on a pitch limit as he's battled injuries and he is now starting to be stretched out into a starter. You might not win a bid for Garrett Crochet with a team like the Los Angeles Dodgers or the Baltimore Orioles or a division leader that can use a starter, that don't care about some of the prospects in their organization because their window is different than the Padres. You could go get a guy like Jack Flaherty. He's going to cost you $7 million out of your $10 million. You only have $10 million to work with, and you got a lot of holes on the team. If we're talking starting pitchers. Mark Feinstein listed Chris Bassett as a potential piece for the Padres. Chris Bassett's making $22 million this year. By the time you acquire Chris Bassett, he's going to be making just under 11. That's your entire budget. Going down the list, Zach Eflin of the Tampa Bay Rays, he's getting $11 million. He's potential fit for Atlanta and St. Louis. You got bullpen pieces in Kirby Yates and Jose Urena out of the Rangers. I mean, I watched them pitch against the Padres. They were good. They were not like game changers. I don't know what the Rangers would want for those players. Carlos Estevez is available as a bullpen piece. They talked about, the Blue Jays potentially selling Trevor Richards as another option. He's not going to be making a lot. But with the criteria that the Padres currently have, it's going to be hard to find a lot of these pieces. And they got to fill some holes here on this roster if they want to be able to survive the second half. I mean, Jackson Merrill's done a great job so far, but he's got to be able to survive that August lull that every rookie goes through. Question in the chat. Because of internal issues going on with the Giants and Blake Snell, would they be interested in trading him for possibly Kim or Brito? I don't know what the Giants are going to do with Hassan Kim. I think Hassan Kim is a player that right now you can't trade because he's more of a value to you as either a bench piece, a defensive replacement, or even a starter at shortstop than he is as a trade piece. Because as we talked about earlier in the week, Xander Bogaerts is coming back. And with Xander Bogaerts coming back, somebody's got to go to the bench. The Padres will probably put Donovan Solano on the bench, but Donovan Solano's been one of your better hitters since Xander Bogaerts went on the injured list. And Donovan Solano, again last night, continued to be one of your better hitters for the San Diego Padres, which means you got to keep him in the lineup. But with the addition of Xander coming back, now all of a sudden your bench gets a little bit better, where instead of Bryce Johnson coming up, maybe it's Hassan Kim off the bench, or maybe it is Donovan Solano. Having Hassan Kim as a bench piece is very valuable to the San Diego Padres. Having him as an everyday starting shortstop, not as valuable, but it's still more valuable than what you're going to get in a trade for him because, again, he's a rental. So on that question, I mean, it's interesting. I just don't know, like, are the Giants buyers? Are the Giants buyers at the deadline? I don't think the Giants are buyers at the deadline. The Giants got a lot of problems. Giants haven't spent a lot of money. Giants are, they're 2 games under 500. They're right there in the wild card. I know they've been battling injuries. They're only 3 games out, but are they buyers? Are they major buyers? Are they buyers enough where they're going to give up on their big off-season pickup? I doubt it. Does Johnny Brito really do something for them? I don't know. Kim being traded to Cleveland for a bullpen arm is interesting because Cleveland could use a shortstop, and if they have a plethora of bullpen pieces, they could potentially give up some bullpen arms for a shortstop, but that's like your only fit. There's not a lot of fits for Hassan Kim because the teams that need shortstops in the race are very few. The Yankees probably could use an additional shortstop, but those teams are also teams that don't have necessarily bullpen arms that you need, unless it's a 1-for-1. The only other situation would be a rental for a rental. Like if you go into the Cleveland Guardians payroll and look at who they have as a bullpen piece that's good enough to be a rental piece that's not too good that they don't want to lose because, I don't know, they're competing for a pennant in the American League. You know, you might be able to find something, but it's going to be very hard to make that trade happen. It's going to be difficult to make that trade happen. Another great show. Fun talking with all of you. Thanks again for joining us on a Sunday morning. We'll be back in action again next Sunday. Have a full Annie and Elston show ready for you tomorrow. Everybody is back with Craig, Annie, and myself. So next time you'll be able to hear me on 97.3 The Fan. Padres baseball coming up at 12:10. Equal Water SoCal Padres pregame show at 12:10. First pitch at 1:10. I'm Braden Surprenant. It's Braden Surprenant Show.